Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. In India, over 78,000 people have tested positive overnight, taking the tally to over 3.7 million, with more than 66,000 deaths. Brazil has registered more than 1,200 deaths and over 42,000 cases in a day, with infections tally approaching 4 million. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 18 people have lost their lives to the virus overnight, raising the death toll to 6,318. Globally, the virus has claimed over 855,000 lives, while infecting over 25.6 million. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner have stressed the need to resume Palestine-Israel talks. Saudi state media said both sides also discussed the regional peace at a meeting in Riyadh. Kushner is on a pan-regional visit after the diplomatic normalization agreement between Israel and the UAE. Turkey says the U.S. decision to lift a 33-year-old arms embargo from the Greek Cypriots has poisoned hopes for peace in the eastern Mediterranean. In a statement, Turkey's foreign ministry said this move is incompatible with the spirit of alliance. It said the decision should be reviewed, otherwise Ankara will take the necessary reciprocal steps. Turkey says two Venezuelan opposition leaders are in talks with the government of President Nicolas Maduro to participate in the upcoming legislative elections. After talks with Maduro and the opposition leaders, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu at a news conference said both sides have agreed on the presence of international observers and the vote scheduled for December. Coming in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now we'll have the news in detail. We start from India, where 1,045 people have died, while over 78,000 people have tested positive in the last 24 hours. Brazil has also registered more than 1,200 deaths and over 42,000 cases in a day. Globally, the virus has claimed over 855,000 lives, while infecting over 25.6 million. More details in this report.
India continues to be the most festering COVID-19 hotspot of the world, with a daily tally of over 66,000, while caseload exceeding 3.7 million. In the Americas, the U.S. has announced it will not join the World Health Organization-led global push for a coronavirus vaccine. Meanwhile, in Mexico, the cases tally tops 600,000 as the country eases restrictions.
The epidemic is not over. In the area you live in, you'll still be able to hear stories and experiences about new cases, but that does not mean the epidemic in general does not exist, and we'll need to start reopening public life as the risk starts decreasing.
In Asia, mainland China has reported 8 new imported cases, down from 10 a day earlier. South Korea has reported 267 new infections as cases remain under 300 for the 4th day straight. Meanwhile, Australia has been pushed into recession, bringing 3 decades of economic growth to a halt. The government is considering to ease restrictions in the Victoria state after a hint of a downward trend in new cases.
First things first, there are 19,224 confirmed aggregate cases of coronavirus across the state since, of course, the beginning of the pandemic. That's 90 new cases since our update yesterday. Sadly, there have been now 576 Victorians who have lost their life because of this global pandemic. That's an increase of 6 since yesterday's report.
For Europe, the WHO says the region can live without a vaccine by managing outbreaks with localized lockdowns. Millions of students around Europe return to school with mandatory masks and social distancing.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 18 people have lost their lives to the virus in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 6,318 so far. The ministry said 441 more tested positive for the disease overnight. It said the number of active cases in the country is at 8,813. More than 280,000 patients out of some 296,000 have recovered, which accounts for a 95% recovery rate in the country. Sindh remains the most affected province with nearly 129,000 infections, while Punjab has reported close to 97,000 cases so far. Now, Pakistan has condemned a decision by the French magazine Charlie Hebdo to republish blasphemous caricatures of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In a tweet, the Foreign Office said such a move to offend billions of Muslims cannot be justified under the pretext of freedom of expression. It added, actions undermine global aspirations for peaceful coexistence and interfaith harmony. Meanwhile, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner have stressed the need to resume Palestine-Israel talks. Saudi state media said both sides also discussed the regional peace at a meeting in Riyadh. Kushner is on a pan-regional visit after the diplomatic normalization agreement between Israel and the UAE. Meanwhile, Washington, Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv have urged the Palestinians to re-engage in peace talks. Earlier, Abu Dhabi reiterated its commitment to a sovereign Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Now, Turkey says the U.S. decision to lift a 33-year-old arms embargo from the Greek Cypriots has poisoned hopes for peace in the eastern Mediterranean. In a statement, Turkey's foreign ministry said this move is incompatible with the spirit of alliance. It said the decision should be reviewed, otherwise Ankara will take the necessary reciprocal steps. The statement said the move disregards the equality and the balance on the island. Turkey has also rejected Austrian claims alleging Ankara of espionage as baseless. The ministry said Austria's comments show Vienna was unable to escape populist rhetoric and anti-Turkey obsession. Moving on, Niger, the UN Security Council's president for September has dismissed the U.S. bid to trigger the return of UN sanctions on Iran. Niger ruled out any move to put forward the snapback draft resolution, citing the lack of consensus in the 15-member body. The United Nations Security Council president said the U.S. or any other member state of the Security Council can submit such a proposal if they want. Last month, Indonesia UNSC President for August said it could not act upon the U.S. measures due to the opposition of 13 Council members. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted Washington will veto any resolution against the snapback measure. Earlier last month, Washington formally notified the UN of its demand to restore sanctions on Tehran. The European Union has welcomed the Libyan ceasefire, saying Brussels continues to support a political resolution to the conflict. This comes as the EU's foreign policy chief Josep Borrell held talks with Libya's internationally recognized Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj in Tripoli. Borrell said the two sides discussed ways forward to advance the political process, to return to the UN-backed military committee talks and to lift oil blockade. The EU's diplomat said Brussels strongly supports mediation efforts and de-escalation measures, including an arms embargo. Meanwhile, Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio also met with both Libyan parties. The foreign minister called Libya a crucial crossroads for building a new model of development in the Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Turkey says two Venezuelan opposition leaders are in talks with the government of President Nicolas Maduro to participate in the upcoming legislative elections. After talks with Maduro and the opposition leaders, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu at a news conference said both sides have agreed on the presence of international observers in the vote scheduled for December. Cavusoglu said Ankara is happy the two sides are close to a deal and that foreign-funded individuals will not take part in the elections. President Nicolas Maduro has also pardoned over 100 opposition politicians ahead of the elections and asked the people to trust his decision.
Understand me. I ask for your understanding. I know what I am doing. I ask for your support. I ask for the understanding of all of Venezuela. I ask for your understanding and ask for your support on this path to peace. I know what I am doing.
Moving on, in the U.S. state of California, fresh protests have broken out in Los Angeles after police shot dead another African-American, Dejon Kizzy. Earlier last week, Pasadena police in the county fatally shot a black man, Anthony McLean, triggering BLM demonstrations.
Said Kinsey ran away when deputy officers tried to stop him from violating unspecified vehicle codes. The sheriff said when reached by the officers, Kinsey punched a cop and dropped a pistol on the ground. However, eyewitnesses claim Kinsey did not have a gun and was not a threat. The deputy shot the man over 20 times, which Kinsey's aunt said was due to her nephew's appearance as a black man. This comes as President Donald Trump reaches Kenosha in Wisconsin and backs police officers, saying they sometimes have to choke people.
We have to condemn the dangerous anti-police rhetoric. It's getting more and more. It's very unfair. You have some bad apples, we all know that, and those will be taken care of through the system, and nobody's going to be easy on them either. And you have people that joke.
After Portland, Kenosha has also become protests hotspot since police shot African-American Jacob Blake multiple times in the back, leaving him paralyzed.
Now, Russia has accused Lithuania and Belarusian opposition leader of not respecting the Minsk sovereignty. Speaking in Moscow, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Lithuania and Svitlana Tishkashkova are employing undemocratic methods. Opposition figure Tishkanoshkaya fled to Lithuania after the country's controversial presidential elections. She is releasing videos from Lithuania calling for protests against the re-election of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Lavrov said the Belarusian president has suggested reforming the constitution to calm the civil society.
Our Lithuanian neighbors, in my opinion, have crossed all lines of decency in the demands they're putting forward. We have reason to believe that they, along with Belarusian opposition politicians, are using not completely democratic methods, which don't exactly respect the sovereignty of the Republic of Belarus.
More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. Facebook and Twitter have taken down accounts allegedly linked to Russian state actors for committing coordinated inauthentic behavior. The company says 13 accounts and 2 pages tied to Russia's Internet Research Agency have been removed from the social network. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation says it provided the information to Facebook against threats to security and democracy. Facebook said a Russian influence operation posed as an independent news outlet to target left-wing voters in the U.S. and the U.K. It said the outlet recruited freelance journalists to write about the U.S. and Britain's domestic politics. Meanwhile, Twitter says it has also suspended 5 related accounts attributed to Russian actors for platform manipulation. The life-size Nourishing Our Future sculpture, entirely made by butter, is put on display in New York City. The sculpture was presented via Facebook Live due to COVID-19 pandemic. The buttery artwork has 2 timely panels. One side shows parents serving their kids food with butter, while the other shows a laptop in place for distance learning in the era of global pandemic. The sculpture is part of the annual New York State Fair, which is organized by the American Dairy Association. Northeast, much of the rest of the fair has been sidelined as a result of the pandemic. France and Spain, once hard hit by COVID-19, are all set to ease pandemic restrictions. Authorities are opening schools while employees previously working from homes are back to offices, but with a new normal. What this post-lockdown time looks like in this report.
Plans to reopen schools are under pressure as the new coronavirus cases continue to rise in Spain, where classes in most regions are set to begin. Children aged 6 and over must wear masks to class. At Larramendi School in Basque Country, works are underway to ensure social distancing, hygiene and ventilation. The faculty believes establishing a distance between students does not promote interaction, which is crucial to learning, but it is still a lot better than online classes.
The normal thing to do would be to have both classes working together in this space, but we will create two bubbles. Half will be on one side and other half in the other space. But every week we will swap the students to the opposite side, so they can be stimulated by different experiences and aren't always in the same space.
Seeking to avoid another lockdown, the French government has laid out new rules for all shared spaces in offices and factories. Donning masks and other novel coronavirus-era accessories is mandatory in workplaces. Although the rule has been deemed necessary by most, management said initially many workers had some qualms against the new measure.
In any case, all the startups have been informed by email they are well aware of the current situation. So they know that they are required to put on and not aside their mask systematically. We have had a lot of little excuses for why they don't systematically have their masks on, but little by little it's gone a lot better. We have really started to get into it and to respect the protocols, and we are not divided on that anymore.
Although the World Health Organization hopes for the pandemic to be over within 2 years, it has warned the countries opening up without having control of the virus is a recipe for disaster. Hence, the world has to embrace a few restrictions as it attempts to get back to pre-pandemic routine.
Well, now markets in Asia Pacific are trading mixed as investors mull the consequences of Australian economic recession and US-China tensions. Mainland Chinese stocks and Hong Kong's Hang Seng have slipped fractionally. Seoul's Kospi has edged up marginally, while Japan's Nikkei 225 has gained almost 0.5%. Australia's ASX 200 has climbed to 2% due to the government measures to cushion the contracting economy. Latest data from the Australian government shows the country has fallen into its deepest economic slump on record in the second quarter. The stats show the country's $1.47 trillion economy shrunk by 7% in the second quarter, continuing the first quarter decline. Canberra has reported its first downturn since 1991 and joins the United States, Japan and the UK and Germany. Addressing media, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said this crisis is like no other and attributed the downturn to the COVID-19. He said the government will keep its policy of maintaining fiscal stimulus and support its people as the country comes out of the crisis. Frydenberg said the Victoria's lockdowns will weigh heavily on September quarter GDP. The June quarter decline is the largest in quarterly gross domestic product since records began in 1959. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.